What's up, Nowstalgia Pod coming at you. We're going to give you your weekly look at what's going on in rock music because we decided to do something a little different.
What's going on, though?
So Dave has basically been pushing me to talk about how rock music as a genre has been declining. I'm not going to say dying quite yet. We'll see how I feel at the end of our discussion. And finally I decided, all right, let's talk about this. I'm ready to talk about it, Dave. I might not be in like 5 minutes. I might have to end the podcast, but for right now, I'm ready to talk about it.
Good. That's good.
So I wanted to start. Dave, what are some rock bands you currently like? Like, what are some newer rock bands you like?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I have new rock bands I like. I just have songs from new rock bands I like.
Okay. So what would be a song you like?
I like Best Friend by Foster the People a lot. I like...
It's not a good start.
Of the Night by Bastille from their first album.
This is a terrible start.
I like The Sound by the 1975, your favorite band.
Oh my god.
I like Safe and Sound by Capital Cities, if
All
you
right.
count them as a
All
band.
Right. Now we're getting somewhere.
You don't count 21 Pilots, I wouldn't.
No.
They're weird. They have band elements, but they're not really rock music. So
right.
Yeah, for new bands, that's about. I mean, I've liked some Haim songs.
Okay.
And yeah, that's about it probably that I can think of.
Well,
I don't seek it out.
Some
usually.
of those are good. Some of those are bad. At least in my opinion.
I like some older Passion Pit.
Yeah, Passion Pit was like mid 2000s though, right?
They started in 2009.
Really?
It's like Sleepyhead.
So
Big Jam.
That 2012 album was their...
Gossamer.
Yeah, that was their second album?
Yeah.
I like that album a lot. It's a good one.
Constant Conversation is a good song, too.
You know, it's interesting because I think your response to that question is how most people would answer it right now. Like, there are obviously people who are more into rock that might have like a favorite band. Mm-hmm, but in general, most people's favorite rock bands are bands from, the aughts, the 90s, even the 80s and the 70s.
Aughts in the 90s, I'd say, probably.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty sad. Personally, what I listen to a lot of is like Tame Impala, Glass Animals are pretty good, Alabama Shakes, and then LCD Sound System I can talk about all the time.
They count.
Yeah, like...
They count as a rock band.
Well, they started in, 01?
No, they count as a rock band, though, genre-wise.
I think yes. But what would be your argument against them?
Isn't it kind of just electronic-y? Dancey?
Well, they...
Like the Avalanches, do you count them as a rock band?
No, but they actually mix.
Okay.
Whereas LCD Sound System doesn't necessarily mix, but they use a ton of machines to... Didn't you watch them on SNL?
No.
Oh, well, I would say that they're definitely rock band. They have lots of guitars, pianos, drums.
Little Dragon?
I don't listen to a lot of Little Dragon.
Fantagram?
I need to get into them. Fantagram...
Probably not.
Right? They're right on the edge.
Electronic duo?
Yeah, electronic duo would probably be closer.
Well, that's Sylvan Esso. You always talk about them.
Yeah, so they're definitely just straight indie. But I would count them as indie rock, but they're really just very indie and like a unique sound. Glass Animals is very close to being just indie because they're very unique as well. So Dave, I guess why don't we start with what are like the most like highest earning bands right now? Like I know that you did some research on the.
They all old.
Are they all old?
Yeah, dude. I looked at the top 10 grossing tours from 2015 and 2016, and yeah, it's pretty clear that old bands make the most money, in large part because they can command the most, the biggest checks in general.
Right.
But 2015, number one was Taylor Swift, number two is One Direction. So those are newer acts, relatively speaking, right? But obviously huge pop stars, so it's justified. Number three, number four, U2 and Rolling Stones. Obviously bands that live around the block. Number six, Fleetwood Mac. Number 8, Billy Joel.
Fleetwood Mac, man, they're...
Number 12, Foo Fighters. That's the... a great look for a modern band.
They're still 20 years old at this point.
Modern band. They have 8 albums since 95, so
crazy.
Not something new.
Fleetwood Mac is actually headlining, we talked about Desert Trip last year, which had McCartney.
Old Cella.
Yeah, Old Cella, basically. Rolling Stones were
Bob
there.
Dylan or something.
Yeah, Bob Dylan, Neil Young. And it's really interesting because they're doing like a classic East and West, they're calling it, where it's the same two bands, but it's basically like the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac are headlining. Like it's being held at Citi Field and I think Dodger Stadium in the summer. And those tickets are absolutely absurd to get. Like on the resale market, they're just nuts, and they sold out in minutes. But it's older acts like that where people, like especially older people, can look back and say like that captured a time in my life. But those songs then get passed down.
Yeah.
Like, what are the songs I'm gonna pass down to my kids?
They're gonna be old songs.
It's gonna be like Bastille and Foster the People, which is not necessarily exciting.
What's the name of it? That San Francisco festival that's coming up. They have The Who.
Yeah,
that really came out of nowhere too, because they've toured
and they have Metallica as well.
Years. Yeah,
who isn't touring this year, at least not heavily as far as I know.
Right.
But it really is sad to think about. So I know that, like, reading off that list, the thing that struck me with it is, of course, these older bands, they can sell the tickets for the most, they can command the highest checks.
They have the most fans.
But they also probably don't do as many shows. And the fact that they're the highest earner is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, so I looked at 2016 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 was Bruce Springsteen. Number 3 was Coldplay. Number 4 was Guns N' Roses when they had that reunion tour. Yeah, not comeback tour.
Yeah.
And in 2015, Grateful Dead was 13th because they had like their final tour, like to end the band basically.
And now it's what, Dead and Friends, Dead and Company.
Yeah, other guy, whatever they call themselves.
John Mayer.
Yeah. Number 9 was Rolling Stones, 2016.
Okay.
But they by far and away had the highest average gross because they made $9.1 million from just 14 shows.
Wow.
So that they had 14 shows, so that was like their average. So they blew everyone else away, even though they were only the 9th total earner. So yeah, pretty impressive. And Paul McCartney was there at number 7. So,
right.
Again, old heads.
It's it's interesting though, because these old heads, they can command so much, but when you think about even the festival circuit at this point, it's basically it goes get a big hip hop headliner, at least one, get like a somewhat big rock headliner, and then get a big EDM act, and then fill out the rest of your lineup with like medium to like high level hip hop acts, medium to high level EDM, couple of rock bands sprinkled in there, and then all just like cheap EDM at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that one, like the highest grossing rock bands are all these old people, because those are the people that still somehow draw people.
They're the only ones that have the national tours.
But that's a good point as well. I'm trying to think of like a band like Eagles of Death Metal or something like that, where even though they have Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age like backing them, mm-hmm. they still don't do like region-wide tours. They mostly just do the festival circuit if they are pumping an album, but they're not doing actual tours.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I look at all of these successful bands from the 2010s. Mm-hmm. At least, not most of them really haven't broken through. I mean, how many of those guys have even headlined their own tour? Not many of them.
That's true.
I feel like what's the realistic ideal for a rock band nowadays? It's to get well known enough and well received enough to be able to get on that festival circuit, and you can mm-hmm. be like a car seat headrest or a Milky Chance or whoever, and hit every festival you want for a year and a half or something. Yeah. And then you just go back into the lab, make your next album, and try and do it again. That's mm-hmm. kind of like the only goals you can have. I mean, who can really expect to be really big unless you're how did Imagine Dragons get so big? Because they're the only band to explode from the 2010s.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're not even that well liked critically. They're just very popular.
Not liked critically, for sure. I think the festival circuit really helps them. I think having songs that they didn't isolate anyone away from rock. They were pretty much softer, poppier rock was helpful.
Pop definitely helps.
And then
get you on the radio.
They also did some collaborations with they did a collaboration with Kendrick, and they were also on the Suicide Squad soundtrack. So they've stayed relevant by being involved with rap acts, mm-hmm. which really seem to dominate. Why do you think rap has overtaken rock? If you had to come up with a theory around that, what do you think it is about rap that makes it so much?
I think it's a generational thing, just because millennials and absolutely Gen Zers just gravitate to hip hop. It's just more relatable, I think.
Right.
We talked a few weeks ago about the XXL Freshmen, and all those young rappers coming up are all 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So the Gen Zers, relate to them, and it's also the music that's been popping for a while. So it's something they're just gonna find and gravitate towards. Whereas all these rock bands that come up, even though some of those guys I'm sure are young, it just doesn't seem to have the same kind of appeal. Just because rock kind of transitioned in the mid-2000s to being a older people thing as it became less mainstream.
I also like this is like a weird theory, and maybe as I flesh it out, I'll feel like I'm not actually going down a road that makes sense. But I feel like hip hop is able to encapsulate the kind of like carefreeness that I think a lot of people kind of want when they listen to music, like that ability to just kind of put a song on and jam out to it, and not like you can sing along the lyrics, it's catchy, but like you're not like really experiencing a feeling or like a moment with it. Whereas like rock, you think about a band like Radiohead, or a band like I don't know, Tame Impala or Spoon or someone like that, where it really takes you to like a very specific moment and place. It's not something you can necessarily always just throw on and vibe to. It really is something you have to think about a lot more. And I feel like, not saying that rap dumbs it down, but it just makes it more accessible to people on like a more even keel.
Yeah, right. So what rock genres are really popular right now? Indie rock, alternative rock, all the old heads repping for classic rock, and then less mainstream
Pop
stuff
rock.
like post-hardcore and pop punk and stuff like that, right? But hip hop has so much versatility and variety nowadays that some people, when they're turning up or whatever, partying, they'll just put on a mumble rap song because having a good beat that you can just bob your head to is all you need to do. Whereas a lot of rock music, having good guitars or good drums, it just sounds like loud noise. It's not a genre that works as well unless it's all come together.
Right, unless you have like the exact right atmosphere for it, like you're sitting around listening to it, like specifically. It's not necessarily most accessible. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I like that theory. So I guess one of the things I thought that might be interesting to do about this is to go through, people that are still actively touring and putting out albums.
Touring test.
Yeah, and seeing
Are you a computer?
And just kind of like seeing like what our thoughts are on them and how like we feel like
those
they
hot
fit
thoughts
into the landscape. Yeah. Did you see Julianne's tweet about that?
I did.
I thought it was pretty clever.
Yeah.
I liked it. So I guess why don't we start with like the old heads and see like Tom Petty. He has a tour this year. Released a new
Still Breaking
new
Hearts
album. Yes, dude. That I've actually seen him live and very good show, very tight.
Most of these old heads have to be good still.
Yeah, and
even so their voices might go like I know like
Bob Dylan.
Pete Townsend definitely doesn't sound the same.
No, and like
and Bob Dylan never sounded good in the first place.
Bro, actually, a colleague of mine went to go see Brian Wilson play with the Beach Boys recently.
The closer for the Giants. Big beard.
No, unfortunately not. But yeah, he played at the Palace Theater, and he they gave him a standing ovation. He like literally went to the microphone and was like, "Please sit down." Like, and just they're like, "Oh, okay." And, like,
jeez.
Not very fun at all, but Tom Petty, pretty fun act. Someone like Paul McCartney,
him and Bruce
Rolling
Springsteen
Stones,
still killing it.
Yeah, him and Bruce Springsteen are probably like, and the Stones. They actually tour.
Stones tour a lot,
pretty actively, and they're like mid-70s.
And they just had a cover album come out last year, and Paul McCartney was it 2 years ago had an original album that wasn't covers. So
yeah, he's actually still I think actively making music.
Had that music with Kanye, of course.
Yeah, I mean
4 or 5 seconds.
The thing that really made him famous, if we're being honest.
Those tweets were so great.
No, amazing. Just
Kanye, what a nice guy to put this Paul McCartney fellow on the map.
Put this old fellow, right in his song just to give him a little publicity. So bands like that, I mean,
U2.
Yeah, U2. It's weird because they've been around for going on 40 years now.
Yeah, and well, don't they have the tour right now or just ended?
Yeah, they're doing the 30-year tour of Joshua Tree.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And Joshua Tree was their third album, something like that.
It's funny for me for U2 too because they got so much shit for putting Songs of Innocence on all the iPhones. Yeah. Whatever iPhone release that was, it was automatically in your iTunes library if you had an iTunes account, even if you didn't have an iPhone. And despite that, they still have millions of fans that pay lots of money to see them all the time. So,
you know what the really interesting thing is about a lot of these bands, though, is that at least one of their band members. Like U2, you think Bono.
That's important, having a star.
Right, exactly.
Rap is such a singular focused thing, even if you're in a group, so people know, I think it's almost more personal. Right. Where rock members kind of blend in sometimes, except for maybe the front man.
Yeah, I think the only big band back then, which doesn't have one of, at least I probably couldn't name one of its original members, probably blasphemy in a way. It's like Grateful Dead, 'cause Jerry Garcia has been dead for a while, and he's probably the one I think of most associated with the Grateful Dead.
Right.
Excuse me. But they're still able to pull in a lot of people. I mean, when they did their farewell show at Wrigley, I think they sold out like a whole week worth of shows.
Pretty crazy.
And
the Roger Waters, the Wall tour from the Pink Floyd fellow.
Oh, that fellow from the Pink
guy.
Floyd. Yeah, he's pretty good.
That was a top earner. Sting.
He's actually coming to Albany.
He is?
Yeah.
Oh. I wasn't sure if he was still actually active.
Yeah.
Does Sting and still do stuff?
I haven't seen.
He's like around, like he's like out there doing things, but I don't know if it's music.
Yeah, I think he did like a song he played a song at the Emmys, right? Or not at the Oscars. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what you're right.
Played a song at the Oscars, but I haven't seen him releasing new music. Or
maybe it was like movie soundtrack stuff. That's what it was.
Same thing as Eric Clapton. And Prince before he died wasn't touring a lot either. Another person also not touring, Van Morrison, who could definitely pull in a lot of money if you really wanted to.
80s bands though. There's a good chunk of 80s bands still doing really well.
Yeah, there's a lot of 80s bands. I mean, we already talked about Bruce Springsteen, but like the Pixies,
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, Fish.
Wow, I forgot to write Fish down on this list.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Fish, kind of is like Dave Matthews is a '90s band, but Fish and Dave Matthews, I kind of think about them the same way, where they're I don't want to disparage them, but they're jam bands that have their own clientele, and they just perform summer tours every year.
Right.
And in Fish's case, they've released an F ton of albums for how many it was.
Well, it's interesting.
13 albums since 1986.
That's pretty crazy.
While never really stopping touring because they have tons of fans.
I feel like every
they have a certain clientele, you know?
I feel like every generation has like that like jam band. Like it went from like Fish to DMB to My Morning Jacket to like Tweed and other bands like that where they basically just like.
But is there a 2010s jam band? I'm looking at all the ones I've written down.
Yeah,
I think so.
I guess
because indie rock isn't jam band, so.
Right. But how much more room could there be in that space when you have?
That's true. Yeah. If the 80s and 90s jam bands are still selling out summer venues, there's no room for a new band to step in.
Exactly.
That's probably half the problem in general.
Yeah, it probably is.
Flaming Lips, another 80s band.
Are they an 80s band, really?
Yeah.
I was thinking of them as like a 90s band.
And Bon Jovi, too.
They released an album back when we were in high school, and then I think they released another one like 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was around there, yeah.
Something like that.
So they're still active, 80s bands.
And then I think the 90s bands where it starts to get pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you see, you have the Foo Fighters, which is a spin-off from Nirvana.
Right, so they
not really a spin-off, but like Dave Grohl from Nirvana.
Common through line, so long lineage.
And then Radiohead.
Yep. Pearl Jam.
Yeah, Pearl Jam. I did not order these at all, which is not
Weezer.
Helpful. Yeah, Weezer. I mean, I feel like they started in the 80s, but they're really, really 90s?
They're 90s band.
Wow.
Jimmy Eat World, Incubus, Blink, Spoon.
Is Jimmy Eat World still touring? They just released an album, right?
Last summer.
That's crazy.
Coldplay. Well, Coldplay. Their debut album was 2000, but they had 9 EPs in the 90s, so I wrote them for 90s.
They're a 90s band.
Green Day.
Do you have the time? But see, the thing is, like, with all of these bands that have lasted, I feel like I could name a member from them. Like Billy Joel Armstrong.
Of course.
Like, you have Dave Grohl.
Chris Martin.
Yeah, exactly. They all have these...
Mark Hoppus. Or everyone knows all of Blink.
Yeah, pretty much.
Travis Barker.
You have, like, these...
Who's the Muse guy? Muse came out in 99.
Matthew Bellamy.
That sounds familiar. Modest Mouse. Also 90s.
I don't know Modest Mouse. Modest Mouse, I feel like is... This is also kind of a weird take. I feel like they really put indie rock into the forefront.
I mean, they're the first indie rock band I had down.
Really?
I mean, yeah.
Like the first one you thought of?
Well, I mean, I don't have any 90s indie rock bands of note to mention. It's all 2000s indie rock bands nowadays.
Yeah, I had to do a little more research than I was able. I had time to do for something like that, but.
Also, the 90s, Jack White, the White Stripes started in 99.
Yeah, I feel like in order to like kind of go through that, you basically have to say like Jack White as his own person, and then like whatever projects he's doing at that time, because it's always going to be a rock hit basically, because Jack White is one of the best guitarists of all time.
He's got two solo records out.
It's actually a really interesting conversation to talk with people who like rock and see, do you prefer like John Mayer or Jack White, because they play so differently, but they're both like known to be great guitarists. Yeah. But yeah, Jack White went from the White Stripes to the Rockin' Tours to.
Is there another one?
He did one. He was in one other band. I'm pretty sure, but I can't think of it this time.
Well, that was the 2000s for him.
Yeah. So he's been jumping around from project to project, and just he collaborates with a lot of people too.
Yeah, he's very well revered, and he also crosses over too. Like he's got good relations with like Kanye and Jay-Z and all the other figures in hip hop.
Was the band? He does. He actually, him and John Mayer also do collaborate with a lot of people like in the hip hop world, which is really interesting.
It just seems like they're more accessible and they like being creative, and some of these other rock guys keep to themselves, kind of reclusive, especially the older ones.
Also, when we were talking about old heads, we forgot to mention Aerosmith.
Oh yeah,
they may have been the first people to really use like hip hop as a vehicle to like boost their like status. Yeah.
When I was prepping for this, I wrote down Kid Rock. And I'm like, it's like country rock /
cowboy, baby,
rap rock, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So Kid Rock, I guess he's somewhere in here.
Bands like Korn and things like that were huge, and they had like a real space.
Limp Bizkit.
You think about maybe like the last like great music festivals, probably Woodstock '99, and you had bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine, who was, R.I.P. I wish they were still around. But Prophets of Rage is somewhat adequate fill-in. After seeing them, I wouldn't say that they're quite Rage, but
no.
They miss Zach for sure.
How do you feel about Tool? Another 90s
See,
band.
I don't really listen to Tool, but
they're also one of these ones that they're actually, although the 90s bands we just mentioned, they've all had a pretty consistent output between the 90s when they started and now. But Tool went away for over 10 years in the 2000s.
Yeah, very shy. Lead singer. He actually doesn't stand at the front of the stage. He stands in the back, basically, in the shadows.
That is interesting. It's like Sia.
Yeah, it really is. Not feeling comfortable with fame in some way.
Third Eye Blind, also a 90s band.
Man, when I saw them in Firefly a couple years ago, they kept saying that they were going to release a fifth studio album next year, and it's been 3 years now. So I think they just released it, to be honest.
Yeah, they did, yeah. Last year, I think. But it didn't make any headway.
Well, and they're touring on it right now, but yeah, it's not.
People want to see Semi-Charmed Life and Jumper.
Exactly.
It's kind of stuck.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like most of these bands that made it were able to get past that idea of their first album being the best one. Obviously some of these bands, you look back and you say their first album might have been their best, but they were able to come up with classics after that. I feel like a lot of more recent bands, we haven't even gotten to the aughts and the teens.
Let's go there now.
But I feel like one of the things that they struggle with is that first album. Everybody wants the next rock prodigy, and that first album is oh, we need to latch onto this.
Sure.
But then how do you follow that up?
Yeah. And
a lot of people want to go in a more creative and diverse direction, and that actually works in their detriment, because people say, well, this isn't the sound we like. This isn't why we fell in love with you in the first place, and move on quickly.
I thought it was interesting that The Killers is probably in that upper pantheon of bands that started in the 2000s, but they only have 4 albums since 2004.
They went on hiatus, and Brandon Flowers wanted to do some of his own stuff, which, you can't really blame him. He had 2 albums that were pretty good. I think his second one was much better than his first, but yeah, it's interesting because them and Kings of Leon kind of started blowing up around the same time,
right?
And neither one was really able to sustain that, and then they took a hiatus, and they're kind of back now.
Yeah.
And I think The Killers probably be releasing a new album, I assume sometime next year. They've been posting pictures of them working on it. So.
Right. Arcade Fire, they won a best album of the year at the Grammys.
What, for Reflector, right?
I think it was their most recent one. Was it 2011 or something?
Yeah. Arcade Fire's interesting. I never really got into them.
Canadian band.
Yeah, Canadian band. Never really got into them. They have kind of the same problem Oasis had, where it's 2 brothers and they sometimes butt heads. Oasis was the extreme version.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Does
anyone like them?
They actually hated each other.
Right.
But Arcade Fire, they've been able to put those differences aside and continue to make really good albums, but it's just never really been my style necessarily. Then you have bands of Montreal who tried to like capture things like that Arcade Fire did and really propel that, and it didn't really catch. I mean, they had maybe one or two good albums of Montreal, but never really able to like push forward with that.
It seems like people want the Arctic Monkeys to drop a new album to save rock, because they're actually one of the relatively newer 2000 bands, like 06 I think it is.
Yeah.
And they're a really good success. Strokes, Black Keys, a lot of bands like that. But then you look at the 2000s, that's really kind of where like the genre really changes, because that's where indie shows up.
Right.
Phoenix jumps on the scene. Then you have kind of like more emo-y, poppy stuff like Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy, early Paramore, stuff like that. And then like more indie things like Bon Iver and Vampire Weekend. Like rock really branches out in the 2000s, and most of those bands are still around, but output was never super strong.
Yeah, it becomes very specific. I think of like Vampire Weekend, who
3 albums.
Yeah, they've also kind of gone on a hiatus, which is something that is really interesting. That it's been like a common theme among a lot of like really popular bands now is they'll put out a couple albums, like reach some level of stardom, and then be like, okay, we're not gonna do this right now.
Yeah, that does not happen in rap.
No, it doesn't, because like if you like reach that like level, you just keep putting it out.
Yeah, if you go away in rap, it's because you weren't good enough and people stop caring about you.
Right.
Yeah, or you're just really old and you're from the 80s and it's okay to stop making music.
Do you think
like Big Daddy Kane and stuff like that?
Why do you think that trend happens in rock and not rap? Do you think it's easier?
I think it's part of the genre, like the competitiveness of rap and stuff, and the need to stay relevant and the need to be the number one, be on top. There's always there's a natural competition to it, whereas rock just doesn't have that.
Right. It's almost like the specificity of like each genre, and like Vampire Weekend is something that no one else does, so they don't feel any urgency to like continue to like be better than another band.
They know people pay attention when they come back.
Exactly.
And they can just go away and go on vacation and do whatever they want.
It's also interesting because I feel like rap, which, I mean, there are rap groups, but mostly it's a solo type of thing.
Yep,
so
definitely is.
There isn't as much like discord as like with band members. Like one of the reasons Vampire Weekends didn't come back is they lost their keyboardist, who was also one of like Ezra Miller's Ezra Miller, jeez.
The Flash.
Ezra
Koenig.
Yeah, Ezra Koenig's creative partners. Like or a band like The Killers, Brandon Flowers wants to do something else, so he's gone for a while. So even like Haim, like they took 3 years to make this out, like this next album.
They only had one album out.
I know. So like, what were they doing? There?
It's not like they're super young. All the Haim sisters are like in their late 20s already. It's like.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I thought they were like.
I think Daniel Haim's like 29.
They probably were early 20s when they started, and then it's been 5 years since.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and that type of mindset is just so. It's like the antithesis of how internet success works and relevance in 2017 works.
And, like as we're talking about this, one of the other things I think that like stops any band from like reaching like high levels of success is that if you get someone really creative, they want to go do something else. Like you have the Arctic Monkeys, and then I'm blanking on his name, but the lead singer goes and makes Glass Shadow Puppets. You have Queens of the Stone Age, who were a huge band from the 90s into the 2000s. Then Josh Homme's like, I'm going to go start Eagles of Death Metal.
Father John Misty was in like 50 bands.
50 bands. And even like a band like...
Frank Turner was in a band before he went solo.
Yeah, the Black Keys. They each, I think, went and started their own band. So they're always looking for like a different creative outlet and a different way to kind of like be pushing themselves like artistically, whereas with rap it's more about like how do I become the biggest I can, and often they're able to move in that own direction without losing their brand because they don't need to move away from a sound and lose popularity.
With rap, it's just you just want to get better and have just make better projects that resonate more. Right. And most fans are on board with that because they want the artist to get better because that means the artist is still around and the artist is doing well.
Right.
Whereas rock bands, if they go in a different direction, they just oftentimes they're just rejected by whether it's their older fans or they can't attract new fans, and it's just very different. Like look at Linkin Park and Incubus.
Yep.
Linkin Park in particular is embracing EDM incredibly. to very bad effects. That's just what they're doing, and they're still selling out arenas.
To incredibly bad effects, is probably a better way to put it. Poor Linkin Park. Although, I think we should get tickets to go see Blinken Park with Wu-Tang and Machine Gun Kelly. I mean, what a ridiculous, like...
And MGK decided that, well, I was having trouble having, big success in rap, so I'm going to go more poppy, and now he has the single with Camila Cabello, and now he went Haley Steinfeld, and now he's touring with rock bands. Like, MGK really taking a U-turn how he wants to promote himself as crossover rapper now.
Yeah, he's a little
strange.
Lost. So, Dave, I guess, like, who is, like, next up? Like, who... Like,
nope, there isn't anyone who's next up.
I mean, I'm looking here.
It's just who's coming back with an album and then going away again. That's all it is.
I'm looking here at
Capital Cities has one album out. And
it's
Safe and Sound was in like 2012.
Like, I made a list of like more like bands I know are like somewhat recent, and like
I have my list of 2010 bands, and we're in 2017. We're almost done with the decade, and none of these bands have 3 albums.
That's crazy.
It's all 2.
See,
2
like,
or more, 2 or less.
I look here. It's like Bleachers. They have a shot, but that guy came from Fun. So if Fun wants to do another album, is Jack gonna go back and do that? Glass Animals, they have their second album. I think that they'll stay on track and probably put out a third album. And second album got a lot of love.
Foster the People's third album's probably coming up soon. Supermodel was, I think, 2014.
I mean, 21 Pilots and Imagine Dragons are probably the most popular ones.
Yeah,
like
that's undeniable, unrefutable.
In the 1975.
But 1975 had a really good year after that second album, but I think have they not disappeared?
Yeah,
I think that's happening right now.
I think they're like just finishing up their tour.
Yeah,
they probably have a couple of shows this summer. I think they're doing a couple of festivals. They're doing Boston Calling in 2 weeks, or a week from this recording, I guess.
Right.
And then there's like AltJ, who I'm like, and Haim, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? They actually have a shot. Like, they could actually be an impactful rock band for the culture. I mean, AltJ is releasing, I think, their third album this year.
Yeah.
So they actually have a shot to be a really meaningful band moving forward. But again, the problem with them is no one knows who they are.
Well, that's my thing. Yeah, you can have 3 critically acclaimed albums, but it still doesn't push the needle any more than it already is going to in terms of being well received,
Yeah, and it's almost like at this point, like, rock is really driven by like the singular, like factors in it. Like, we talked about Dave Grohl, like,
Eddie Vedder.
Yeah, like those kind of people are the ones that push the genre forward, and no one has established themselves in that way other than maybe like Brandon Flowers since like the mid 2000s. I mean, James Murphy in his own way, but like you said, he's more electronic.
And he's also very eclectic, and
yeah,
they've ended their band already and come back.
Right, and just super hipster. And
yeah.
I don't know if you read his Wikipedia page, but one of the ventures he wanted to do when he ended LCD Sound System was open his own cafe, or like his own coffee cafe. Nice. I was like, that's like the most hipster thing I could possibly imagine. So yeah, I don't know, it's interesting.
I mean, all the bands that have kind of come out this year that we've touched on the past pods, SoundCloud.com/Nowstalgia pod.
Check it out.
Cloud Nothings, Future Islands, Japan Droids.
Yeah, Japan Droids, yeah.
Are they not all just bands that are good? People like, you can see them pretty regularly, and that's all they're going to be, I think.
Yeah, it's
Milky Chance.
Milky Chance. Did we talk about that album?
You mentioned it. I don't think I listened to that one.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
What about Car Seat Headrest?
It's going to be interesting because he's actually released like 4 albums so far.
Well, you know the funny thing about him is he has 13 albums, but only 2 of them are on the label.
Right, exactly.
So he has actually a huge output since 2010.
And he's wicked young. I mean, he's like probably like 28, but have 13 albums already is like crazy. But I don't see him
technical definition of album.
I don't see him like achieving like rock superstar.
It's too niche.
Right, exactly. And it's just like, I don't know, like
what about like the Lumineers? They're folk rock, but Mumford got huge. Yeah. And Mumford and Sons have 3 albums since 2009, and they're massive.
Yeah, I think like those kind of albums will always have a place because like soft rock and acoustic rock will always be appealing for like the right mood, and like it's like an easy thing to put on the background of someplace. But in terms of like selling out stadiums and stuff, I can never picture the Lumineers.
Yeah. So that reminds me. So Lumineers had a Heyo, right? Their huge hit from the first album. And their second album came out, Ophelia or whatever?
Ophelia, yeah.
And did not nearly have as big of an imprint.
So
Same thing with Bastille, right? They had Pompeii, which was a huge radio hit. Second album comes out a few years later. Nothing. Foster the People, actually to a lesser extent, the same way, because they did not have a Pumped Up Kicks come out of their second album.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think only, like, 21 Pilots has been able to take, like, a somewhat popular first album and, like, propel that to, like, a much bigger second album.
Definitely.
So we'll see. I mean, I think this might be a good place to stop, though, because I was actually feeling pretty optimistic about this conversation. As we talk more about the teens, I'm feeling
Well, you know who's doing some festival this year? Jared Leto. 30 Seconds.
Yeah, he's doing Firefly.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, huh, it's really interesting.
Not like 30 Seconds to Mars, but shout out Jared Leto, man. He's really wearing his hats. No, I do not at all.
Didn't you think his character in, like, the Blade Runner trailer basically looked like the Joker, kind of? Just, like, creepy and, like, weird. I feel like he's going to be, like, that niche actor that, like, does that. I hope he, like, moves into, like, something a little more normal moving forward. At least for, like, his next role, because I think he needs to... I think he could be huge. Like, even bigger than he already is.
Yeah. Sure. I think all the Rockheads would be mad if we didn't at least mention Cage the Elephant.
Yeah, Cage the Elephant.
They're, like, really well liked.
It's people like them and, like, Monsters of Men and... like the Lumineers, who I see at every festival, and I'm just like, yeah, you're fine. Like, you're enjoyable.
Keep doing what you do.
But
Ryan Adams, he's got hella albums.
So
they're all the same.
I was reading that article about the Strokes.
On Vulture?
Yeah, on Vulture. And basically it starts off just being like, Ryan Adams was giving Albert Hammond Jr. tons of heroin, so they told him to, like, stay away from the band. And I was like, holy shit, like, Ryan Adams is kind of getting torn apart in this. Like, so yeah, but Ryan Adams, he is what he is. He's not gonna revolutionize rock. We need a savior.
What about the XX? Because Jamie XX is a figure that
he's a DJ.
He get big, yeah, but he's a DJ.
I mean, like,
and their last album was had his influence over it the most, right?
I think the XX's next album will be the one that, like, defines what they're gonna be. Like, if they go back to, like, what they did on their
first
self-titled album, I think that will kind of, and if they can pull it off well, that'll make them, like, a really viable, long-lasting rock band. If not, they're going to become, like, a electronic rock band, like LC Sound System, like you were talking about, something like that. Which LC Sound System, I love them personally, and I think they're a much better rock band than the XX have ever been. But at the same time, it's a genre that's niche. Again, it's not going to make huge waves. So, we'll wrap up there, man. I mean,
2017.
SoundCloud.com/NowstalgiaPod. Subscribe on YouTube here.
Here at the end, here right now.
Yeah, and give us a rating review on iTunes.
Our Spotify playlist.
Yes.
Which you can find linked at SoundCloud or YouTube. Has a lot of rock songs that have come out this year.
Yes, so, and we're updating it frequently.
They come out from time to time. Put them on the playlist so you don't forget them, because the charts will forget them. So we have to make sure you don't.
We got some of the Spoon album on there, which I'm still very much enjoying. So we'll be coming back at you next week with a preview, or I guess like a somewhat like, this is what's happening in summer movies, and this is what's going to happen in summer movies review.
Correct.
We're currently in it.
Yeah.
Kind of stuck up on us.
Hey. What's up?
All right. Catch you next week.